Welcome back to another episode of Beyond Giving, the most popular nonprofit podcast on the Boost Network, sponsored by GiveKit. This week, we've got Steven from the Finally Foundation, taking the idea of financial literacy and education to an entirely new level. Thank you so much for coming on, Steven.
Thank you.
So I'd like to learn a little bit about, first tell us what the Finally Foundation is and kind of what you guys are working on right now.
Absolutely. Finally Foundation really came out of my own personal journey on financial literacy. About 2 years ago, I really started thinking at the middle stage of my career, what financial literacy means for me as a person, my daughter, who's in the room right now. And, it's an everyday conversation, but there's really not a lot of good resources. And when I think about the way I grew up, Finally Foundation really was it's a love story to myself. It's what I would have wanted when I was younger. Our mission is to empower and encourage and support financial literacy amongst communities that are financially insecure. And we're encouraging action. So the goal here is not just literacy. I think that's important, but ultimately, I think like any other habit, learning it, doing it, seeing the outcomes from it is vitally important. So our goal really and how we want to do this is to partner with nonprofits, small businesses that are providing financial literacy to their clients or their employees and create a reward system. Right? We want to encourage people to put the literacy they're learning into action, and we believe that'll have impact, but we want to report on that as well. We want to wrap that around as well.
That's such a unique kind of component too, because you hear about all of these financial literacy programs all over the place, right?
Yeah.
Teach you how you should manage your money, how you should think about investment, how you should think about savings. Well, you very rarely hear, and when I say very rarely, I think the first time I heard it was from you, taking those ideas, teaching that education, and helping people put that into action, and then incentivizing that. So what does that actually look like? What types of things do people that come through the Finally Foundation learn, and then how do they apply that to their day-to-day lives?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I'll be honest, the thing I love about Finally Foundation, the way we're approaching it, is we're learning, right? When I first started this journey, I thought we were going to provide literacy. I did a trip to SA Hope Center, still working with them as a matter of fact. They do a great program called
really cool organization.
Faith and Finance. They're serving the right kind of community, people that without their services wouldn't have the resources, and providing really more of a structure around financial literacy. So when you think about what we're trying to do, that's a great example of how we structure it. So knowing that SA Hope Center has the literacy as a component, we're not trying to rebuild that. And that's really part of the journey, is customizing this Lego box full of things we're going to do with a nonprofit to each nonprofit's journey. So if they're providing literacy as they are, we're really there to support them. What we work with them on is trying to understand what their curriculum is, what kinds of habits they're teaching people, and then they get to choose the habits that ultimately they want to reward. So in their case, they're doing things around budgeting and saving and really focusing on charitable giving, ironically enough. So those are the habits we reward, right? We take those habits, we make sure that those things are understood up front. Do these things, be rewarded. In this case, we create a point system. So each of those habits, once completed, they have to demonstrate that they understand what that is. They get points, and they can use those points for a customized set of rewards. And that's something we're working with the nonprofits to generate as well. So when you think about the highest level, what we're trying to do is there's a lot of great free, low-cost, committed energy around financial literacy. I don't want to reinvent that, right? I want to be a service to the nonprofits themselves by saying, what are you doing, and how do we best match our empowerment, our encouragement, our reporting ecosystem to match what you're doing.
So you're kind of additive, and you help fill in the gaps for the organizations and the partners that you work with.
Yeah.
How do you approach that? So an organization that wants to work with Finally Foundation, for example, what does that relationship look like? How do you figure out where their gaps are, where you can be most valuable, and do you ever worry about what scale looks like with that?
Yeah, and I think we'll talk about my own journey in small business, large business. Scale is on my mind quite a bit. We're probably active with 2 or 3 nonprofits. So I'll just use those as examples. I mean, a lot of it is really, number one, saying on mission, I want to make sure we're serving the underserved, right? So when I say financially insecure, there are ways, ultimately we'll get to a point where we can objectively say, is this a financially insecure community? But today, it's really just making sure that these groups are financially insecure and focused on action. So SA Hope Center has a financially insecure community. I'm not going to reinvent that. They'll have the case management layer. So they have people that are committed to these folks every day, with or without me, to hold them accountable. And that's really the first building block for what we're doing. I think the other component, and this is where it differs, SA Hope Center has education. I've done this work with David Robinson Fellowship. He offers scholarships to 10 students each year at IDEA. And they asked me to come in and do a base level financial literacy. So for them, I did the financial literacy program. And then the rewards really just depend on the budgeting for each
Right.
organization. I've done a lot of self-financing because we're starting. So when you talk about scale, really what that translates to me is I really want to get to a point where I have a curriculum of sorts of all the different habits. Some I've come to the table with. People bring up great ideas all the time. You know, the one that comes to mind here recently is creating a trust or will, right? It doesn't naturally come up to the top 10 things you're thinking about when you
Right.
think financial security. But listen, as you get older, you're thinking about how do I give whatever I have to my next generation the way I think is right. So that was an idea that somebody else gave me, right? So I think what will happen, scale will sort of take foot, we'll get this virtuous cycle once the habits and the things that we're going to reward people sort of crystallize. And I think the other piece, and this is sort of part and parcel of what I've done in previous business, I like partnering with people. You know, like ironically enough, GiveKit is a good example, right? I like working with local folks, and in my experience, if you get good people, you get good organizations working together, that's good. So at least the early stages of what scale means to me is I really want to get a series of donors that get this. I want to get a series of partners. And what I mean by that is people willing to give goods, products, services as rewards to people doing these things. And I want to get nonprofits here in San Antonio, ultimately elsewhere, that have the low income, financially insecure communities, have the case management. If I can put those three building blocks together, I don't have to build a lot, right? I'm there to encourage and support these groups to talk to each other, to collaborate. Does that make sense?
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely. And that makes, as you grow, that makes it a lot easier too. And especially if with your curriculum, you know, if you develop this curriculum and it's kind of modular, right? So organizations can use the parts that fill in the gaps
Yes.
for them. I think that makes it a lot easier. That's pretty exciting. So let's talk about your background a little bit, Stephen. I know you come from a product-y background, right? Am I remembering that correctly? Like a technical product?
Yeah, I'm a bit of a Forrest Gump. So I think
Okay.
depending on where you're asking in my resume, I'd have a different story. I tell people all the time I am a Jersey kid, and I always say that because I think there's a lot of formative things that are in my DNA level that grew up just being from New Jersey. That's maybe a podcast by itself. But I'm a blue-collar kid. I grew up in a household that did things. My whole family worked for supermarkets. And when I was coming up, it was pretty clear early that I did not want to stay a blue-collar person, right? I always aspired for, I was curious about other things. We didn't have the money, right? So a lot of the early interactions I had with finance it was this thing over there that I had to get. So I was told early that we wouldn't have money for college, so if you wanted to do it, it was school or it was academics or it was sports. And thankfully enough, luckily enough, those were things that within my reach, I took them very serious. And I went to school for what I thought was business. It was an econ degree, which is not business. Okay. But in my household, econ, graph, charts, it's business, right? So I did that, and I started my career in consulting. I'm a little older, but I was with what was Anderson Consulting. Now it's Accenture. So my first 4 years was a consulting job. And what a blessing it was, right? Because it's if you're a person like I am that watches Discovery Channel, always wants to know how things are work, that's the perfect job for that kind of personality.
Definitely.
So I did service work for 4 years. I love the work. I love the inspiration working with Type A people but wanted to see the idea through. So I went to, what brought me to Texas, I went to UT to get my MBA because I wanted to get the business degree, and that was the journey. And then after UT, I actually worked at HEB for a while. So I started off in a internal consultant role, ended up as the toilet paper buyer for HEB.
Nice.
So yeah, this is where the Forrest Gump part of it comes in. And to be honest with you, I love that job because it was really, though it wasn't a entrepreneurial job, I had a desk. I had categories of products. I had pricing and supply chain and the partners I was working with to serve the customer. I could walk into a store and see if we were doing the thing, right? So the tactile nature of that job was kind of fun. And you'd come in every day with a challenge. You'd walk out every day with a solution, and it felt good. And I had a P&L. I had accountability, but it really was, if you're an entrepreneur, you know the feeling of, are we going to make payroll, or do we have that next customer coming in? When are they paying this? Because I got this bill due then. So really that was the first 20 years of my career, if you will. The last 20 have been me working with smaller businesses. So QuickPath, Mobius Partners, I was with CodeUp. These are smaller businesses, services business, trying to serve. And then in the last, I'd say 5 years, it's been entrepreneur. So I currently own a Amazon delivery business out of Buda. We've got like 40-ish trucks that serve South Austin.
Nice.
And then I've got D1 Training. It's a fitness franchise. And, really, as I started with, the Finally Foundation was really always a love story. I think about all the journey I didn't, or all the advice I didn't get along this journey. It's really me learning the nonprofit side of this community. And as much as I feel like I've learned and loved San Antonio, the last 2 years have been, it's almost like a whole nother universe.
Yeah.
Meeting different people, I'm right back at ground zero in some ways learning, which is, for a person like me, something I really enjoy.
Yeah, arguably the most exciting part of anything that you're doing is at the very beginning where
Yes.
you're figuring it out
Yes.
and pushing it through.
Yeah.
So we've got econ studies, and then MBA, and then toilet paper purchasing, and then consulting.
Yeah.
How does all of that translate into wanting to start the Finally Foundation?
Yeah.
And what was the moment when you realized that this is something that you needed to do? It's time to pull the trigger.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if there's a genesis moment, but I will say the clarity that I got to start it came out of, unfortunately a failure, right? CODIP's closure, I was, part of the leadership team there, and that felt really close to home because I was working with communities that were very much like me. We were taking people that, if not with other, without a CODIP around, would not have gone into IT. Mm-hmm. And I love that. And just the repetition of seeing really good stories over and over and over again. I think there's maybe a glimpse of some of the things that inspired me. But when CODIP closed, I had a lot of time to think, right? So the entrepreneur part of my journey, I've always loved. I like serving people. I like starting hard things, working with good people to get those things solved.
Definitely sound like an entrepreneur.
Yeah. And the insanity of the risks of that is the other side of it that they don't talk about as much. But it's on the whole, it's a fun thing. But the Finally Foundation part of the journey, candidly, I tell people this all the time. I lived a charmed life, not because it was easy, but because every time I needed something, life manifested the solution, right? And you have to open the door, you have to go through, you have to put the energy and work in, but I had choice, and I was curious, and I had a mentor here or there that would answer questions. I had people that would deal with my bullheaded approach to things, say, you know what, you could be better if you just, ask more questions, or.
Yep.
And, candidly, I was lucky. Especially around financial literacy. I mean, how do you buy your first home? What's a FICO score? How am I going to finance college? I was supported with people that just happened to be there, and that's luck. If you look at the stakes today, they're night and day. I mean, there's a lot of strong arguments for Social Security not existing. We're seeing a lot of what we would call publicly invested institutions and safeguards and safety nets. They might not be there, right? So I tell my daughters all the time, we're going to act as if we can't pay for college. We're going to act as if, Social Security is not going to be there. And you have to, as early as possible, really understand these things because they're not hard. It's maybe the one education you don't have to go to school for. Mm-hmm. And the idea that 50% of our population, maybe less, feel financially insecure and not literate in this space we're going the wrong way, as they say, right? We have to be saving at the very time when I could have a stick of gum dropped off in this building in 15 minutes by DoorDash, right? And Amazon's reminding you if there's something in your cart for more than 5 minutes, right? We're telling people to save, but everything we're showing people is not safe. And the stakes are too high. Luck is not part of the equation anymore, and it's easy, right? So I'm one of those types of people. If I see that kind of setup, I'm asking myself, what can I do to help? And this is it.
So do you find because you made those examples about kind of convenience over maybe smart purchases. I can't count how many times I ordered a $28 burrito because I didn't want to get in the car, right?
Yeah.
And so do you find that as you're teaching these lessons, do you have to help people reshape or refocus the way they think about these types of things? So a $28 burrito on DoorDash is probably the same as the $5 burrito that you go pick up, right? Just $23 less. Are people more willing, or people kind of open to that, or are they more convenience over everything? What are you kind of finding?
Yeah, that is interesting. And you might think because I'm running a nonprofit focused on financial literacy, I have some deep statistically backed opinion on that. I don't. What I'm going to offer is anecdotal, and I think even the roots of my nonprofit are about encouraging the right thing as opposed to focusing on the wrong thing, right? Again, growing up blue collar, I think there's a lot of shame, there's a lot of pride, there's a lot of reasons not to talk about things, and I think the focus on don't buy that $28 burrito is reinforcing some of those feelings. Where I come from is really truly believing that if you budget and you feel the confidence, oh man, it's all right here, I can see it. Or you invest for the first time and you see that your money made money, right? I do this exercise in one of the trainings I do. I take two groups, not real money, but I'm saying you're going to get 30,000, you're going to get 30,000. You're going to spend $50 a month for 50 years, $30,000. You're going to wait 25 years and spend $120 or sorry, $100 a month for the latter half. And I just asked them, how much do you think you make making the same investment return? And it's 80,000 for one, 290,000 for the other. You can just see the look on people's face, and that moment to me is the point, right? Because if you show people that, and that's fictitious dollars. I've had those moments in my own investments. Like, oh man, that made what? I mean, my daughter has investments where she's outpacing me, and I'm like, do you know what you made? You know, and it's not like dollar large, but it's percentage large. I think if you show people that, as I was shown, they make those choices. I mean, I'm at the point where I certainly spend money, but it's after I've spent money on the things that are more important to me. You know, my daughter's 529 account, my retirement account, all these things are taken care of because I've seen that, oh man, that's a pretty cool moment. And that's what I think we're trying to do with Finding the Foundation.
So it's like, so it's not about don't do this, right. Do this, plan for it. Make sure that it makes sense. Make sure that you can get some sort of gain from it.
Correct.
That's an interesting approach because I really like that. But you often, that's not what financial literacy is, right?
Even for me, It's very different.
It's often like, don't spend this money here, spend this money here, put this here, don't do this. Even when you talk to a lot of like financial advisors, like that's their job. It often has that kind of approach. So that's an interesting way. Do you feel like that you have more success with that kind of approach versus, I mean, obviously we have all these financial programs and we still have a population that, like you said, is 50% financially illiterate, right? And so obviously what we're doing doesn't work. So are you seeing the kind of net return on this different approach that you take? What does that kind of look like?
Yeah, so again, I'm not trying to dodge the question when I say this because I am still very young in this journey. Again, anecdotally, what I'll say is I am seeing early success with the handful of experiences I have. And some have been with Finding the Foundation, some have been, frankly, in my own life. My nieces, for example, have heard the annoying uncle comment about, what are you doing with your money? And I'm not doing Christmas gifts anymore. I'm going to do investments in a fund, and we're going to set this up. And if you're in my family, you've heard the Yoda quote, do or do not, there is no try, more than you want to admit. It's at the point where it's that annoying. But that journey, my personal journey that's sort of turned into this nonprofit journey, I can tell you, like, my nieces are at the point where I'm getting them calling me going, hey, what do you think of this investment? My daughter's right here to the right, so I want to peek over, but even her, we put money aside, and at first I don't think she understood what she was invested in. She was invested in Google and Starbucks and a few things, and one day she came to me and said, hey, Roblox was one of the things she was invested in, which I thought was a bad idea, but she was playing Roblox, and I encourage people to invest in things you know.
That probably turned out to be really well.
It actually did really well, but I'm proud of her for this moment because she came to me, she said she was reading an article, her friends were talking about the idea that people were acting as if they were kids when they're really adults, and it wasn't a comfortable conversation. She wanted to get out of Roblox, and I'm like, okay. But I mean, that's exactly what we talked about. Get invested in things you like, so you know when you're not liking it for the reasons you get out. And she got out of that, and we got into Google, and like a week later, Google had some European lawsuit get settled, and it's up 30%. This girl's made 100% on her money in 6 months, right? But like, is that my training, or is that me just, putting a light on a path that she could take and then she's going to take? And that's really what I've seen anecdotally, and I hope it'll manifest as results in this Finding the Foundation. But I think from my own personal journey, me coming from ignorance into somebody giving me advice that made sense, my family, a little bit of anecdotes I have with the nonprofit so far, I think encouragement is the path. And here's what's nice about the other part of Finding the Foundation I neglected to say earlier is I believe that these things, once done, make you more secure, but we have a commitment to surveying. So I want to survey people when they start with us, when we finish the program, every 6 months thereafter for as long as we can finance, and those themselves are rewardable, right? Congratulations, thanks for doing that survey. Here's rewards. Because I think if I do those surveys, I'll know, and I think coming out of business like I had, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with nonprofits, but nonprofits start with what's most important, which is the heart. But they have a hard time oftentimes demonstrating impact, right? And if you're in business, you don't get a budget that you don't have an ROI to own up, and you don't get a project without a status report or two, right? So I come from those backgrounds. So even if I'm wrong, I'll be able to prove it to myself and change course and trajectory accordingly.
I love data-driven everything. Like
Yeah.
data for everything makes sense, and you make a really good point there too. You know, a lot of nonprofits, they're focused very much on the mission, the thing that
Yes.
they're passionate
Yeah.
about, which is incredibly
Mission.
important. You cannot run without that. But also a nonprofit, while it's not focused on profits and dividends and shareholders, right? It's still assets in and liabilities out, right?
Absolutely.
It still operates very similarly. So you have to have kind of that business side along with that vision and passion
Yeah.
side to make it work. And it sounds like you guys, I think you specifically bring both of those, which is really good.
I'm open.
So one of the things that you had mentioned earlier, we've mentioned a couple times throughout this conversation about financial advice, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so of all the advice you've ever received, what would you say is probably the most important piece of financial advice that you received, whether it was from parents or family or business associates or wherever it came from?
Yeah, that is a good question, and I'm going to resist the urge to say what I want to say until the end. But I think in general, I wouldn't say I'm a zealot for Jim Cramer, but I've read a couple of his books, and I like his approach that basically says you should invest in things you understand. And he goes even further in saying that if you don't have the time to know what companies to invest in, don't invest in a company, invest in a mutual fund. And I think that really clean line is helpful for me, because I think when I started off very mutual fund focused, because I didn't understand the markets.
Right.
You're not going to get the highs or the lows of any one stock, but it was a good entry point. And then as I've gotten more mature, I've picked stocks. And I look around me, what I'm buying, what my kids are buying, what my friends are talking about. Like, I'm very much one of those believers that you should not invest in NVIDIA if you don't know what they do. I don't care how high it goes. But the other thing I was resisting to say is, because it's sort of in your question a little bit, is don't rely on somebody else's advice.
Okay,
You know,
nice.
because it really is insane to me that I think we're all aware enough of the GameStop meme fund concept, and just candidly, there were lots of people that made a ton of money and a lot of people that lost a ton of money. And guess who you hear from, right? You hear from the people that made money. It's often to me like Vegas, which I hate. This is why I go this path, because you always hear about the people that put the quarter in the slot machine, they won, but they're not building hotels because people are winning large.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what's unfortunately very prevalent in the investment space is you go from financially insecure like I did, completely unaware of how this works, and your first entry point oftentimes, too often, is some talking head telling you should get invested here, right? And I think there's this whole middle ground that Financial Foundation is trying to serve, which is just get somebody that's not doing anything to open up an account. And oftentimes people are asking, what should I invest in? Like, let's not worry about that yet. Like, do you have a brokerage account? Do you have a 529 account? Do you know what they are? By the time we get to investing and what to invest in, I think that's really more advanced 201, 301 level things. And again, I think there's the Financial Foundation certainly is not going to serve all these questions, but I think there's a huge gap in the financial literacy space that is missing the idea that people are very, very insecure and scared, don't have the language, and most of the marketing is focused on people that are loud and in your face and telling you to invest in this or telling you to do it now, and
So true. People
people just don't know what they're really invested in. And unfortunately, when it goes bad, they don't know why, and they're turned off. And for people that I frankly grew up with, that creates anxiety, that creates inertia, that creates, I'm not going to do this or I don't trust it. It's gambling, and so.
And so your approach is more give them the tools and resources they need to figure out what makes sense for them.
Yes.
To figure out where they should invest, what account they should open. Like your daughter, I want Roblox. Now I do not want Roblox.
1000%.
Go into Google. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and that's really cool. So how old is Finally Foundation now?
Yeah, we started in 2024. If you want to count it by how long I've been talking about it, it's a 52-year-old company. No, it's I really started the journey in 2024. I think I got my 501c3 status letter, which, funny enough, made me tear up a little bit. I don't know why, but when I got that,
It's an achievement.
This is pretty cool. This is pretty cool. But
Did you do the long form or the short form?
Long form.
Yeah, so that's an achievement. You worked for that letter of determination.
Yeah, no, it was good. And even now, board governance and all the things that go into nonprofit, you'd think it's just like running a business, and I think there are a lot of common things, but I'm learning. I mean, this feels like the first 2 months of any project I've ever been on, 2 months of the first job I've taken. It's fun. It's exciting.
And so in that time, What's like been the most exciting part? Was it when you first filed for that 501c exemption, or was it when you were solidifying the curriculum, or when you started working with these organizations? Like,
Yeah, no, it's that latter part, Zach. I can't say this enough. And I think this is maybe what is, I'd say unique about me, but I'm at a point where I only want to work with people I respect and enjoy. I only want to work on challenging things. I've never been much of a rubber stamp puncher, or try 2 more years till pension. That's not been my. And I think even now, when I think about the administrative work to setting up a nonprofit, and there's development, and marketing, and all these things I will learn at some point. The thing that has always really made me tear up in some cases is that moment when you have somebody like, that's it. I mean, you just to make it more obvious. Finally, Foundation. When you think about why the name, I had a very good friend, Alex Flores with Fluorescent Marketing. Little plug.
She's amazing.
She's great. But she and I worked with CodeUp, and we were ruminating on the name of this business for some time. And finally, Foundation was there because it's a play on the whole. Finally, finally I did it. And I've had those moments. We all had.
Yep.
Like sometimes it's small things like riding a bike. Sometimes it's like, oh, finally I have a house, or something big. And I love that moment of clarity that you get to see over and over again. Even for the D1 fitness franchise I had, we did this training, and I had our head coach, good kid, has money saved, and I showed him how to open up a brokerage account and an IRA and a 529 account. He's about to have a kid, and you could just see it, and that's it. Like, yeah, 10 minutes later you have an IRA. Now move the money here to there. And he's another one that he kept asking me what I invested, and I told him I wouldn't tell him. And he made his own decision I didn't agree with, but I won't tell you what he's invested in. But he made 20% in like 2 weeks. And he comes into work going, it's up 20%. I'm like, yeah. Isn't that cool?
What's really exciting about that story too is he went from asking you where should he invest to being confident and comfortable in deciding where to invest, yes. Right? And I think that's the point, right? That's the whole focus here. Yeah. I love that, as you're explaining the name finally, you bring that kind of sense of encouragement and confidence into the identity, the core of the organization. That's going to be a really good kind of guiding principle too.
Yeah.
So what's next for Finally Foundation? What does the next 2, 5, 10, 100 years look like?
Yeah. I think, I call them, my mentors, if you will, but people that have been surrounding me around the nonprofit space and helping me understand what's there. I think there's probably the more classic answer of, we've got to focus on development, and we've got to get board governance set up and all the things that help scale a nonprofit. I think for me, I feel really encouraged by the experimentation phase we're in. So my own personal belief is I want to work with as many nonprofits as I can, as many small businesses as I can, serving clients, serving employees. Think about that for a second. Like, nonprofits often serve financially insecure communities, but they also employ financially insecure communities. You don't go into nonprofits to make millions, right?
It's true.
These are the same people they're serving are often going, how do I set up this? Or I don't have enough saved for that. So to me, the more of those I can serve, the more I'll learn about what I need to have to serve them as a community. So I think that's one tranche of growth for me. The other piece of it is, candidly, the partners. Maybe a little less obvious, but when we talk about people doing the thing, earning points, or whatever, I want an ecosystem of partners that want to serve this same community. Right? I've got a couple different examples. I think Alec Chapa.
Yep.
He and I have talked about things that we could be doing together, whether it's financial literacy he provides or services. A good friend of mine, Howie Nesto, put me in touch with David Delisle. David's out of Vancouver. And he, for his kids, wrote a children's book around maybe not advanced topics, but just what finances mean to a parent showing their kids via story. So we've talked about using his book as some of the rewards, or he's got a board game coming. So really, I'm trying to develop not just a client base, which would be nonprofits and employers, but I want to create a partner base of financial services organizations, people that have in-kind services that feel like I do, that this community could be served with very simple things. I want that partner community there. And then, you wouldn't be a nonprofit if you weren't saying just having donors. I mean,
yep, absolutely.
I'll be candid. I feel like I'm the original donor. Like, what we've done so far has been self-financed. I say that not to look for shine, but I say that because my original intent was to invest in a nonprofit, donate to a nonprofit and see. And it's not knocking any one nonprofit, but the reason why I created Finally Foundation is because I want to feel proud that if there's money going out the door, it's because you did something with it. Because I know if you created the budget, or you created a 529 account, or if you did the things, I know that if I ask you 5 years from now, you'll have more money than I gave you. And how cool would that be if you go to a donor community and say, that's our model. Our model is to, I don't want to call it an ROI, but I want to believe that if you give us $1, I want to be able to say this created wealth for this person, stability for this person. Their kids are now saying, I have an account. I want that direct value chain counted. And so the donor community is important, but I think you have to do the first few things to be able to really, with credibility, go to the donors and say, listen, I've run pilots with XB, X, Y, and Z, and here's what I've seen. So I'm going as slow as necessary, but as fast as possible, I tell them.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah, that's the smart. I often, people often refer to me as like a bull in a china shop, right? I like to move very quickly and like to get things done. And
we should work together.
Well, that's why it's good to have co-founders that are like, no, Zach, you've got to think this through. We've got to, if we break something, we'll fix it later if it's important, like that type of thing. But that doesn't scale well. So moving with intentionality as slowly as necessary and as fast as possible. I love that. So how can the community get involved? What do you need from the community, and where can they learn kind of more about how they can help?
Yeah. I mean, all of the above, right? So if you're a nonprofit, a small business that is already sort of invested in financial literacy for your employees, and you want something that's going to sort of encourage them to put it into action, please follow up with us. I think if you're a partner, and I think this is where I want to leave myself open to the great ideas that are listening, but if you think by providing your service or product is something that the nonprofit participants would benefit from as a reward, I want to hear from you, right? Because I've been inspired and it's opened my eyes to so many different ideas that are out there, having conversations with other people. But I want partners. And from a donor community standpoint, nonprofits right now are really struggling with the economy and what it is. Really my outreach to donors is not just the ROI-ish conversation, but it's also I want to collaborate. I think it's much more effective, and what we need is donors that get that they want to partner me with other nonprofits so that $1 becomes 8, so the scale that comes with that. And then, I think this is newer for me, so it's harder for me to crystallize into an example, but volunteers, right? As a for-profit, I guess we had interns, so I guess that's a little example, but volunteers are not something I'm used to, but I know volunteers are the lifeblood of what we do. And I'm lucky enough to have several different people that have, raised their hand and say, I want to help. Any volunteers that want to help. We have a handful of events that are great learning experiences. Actually, this next weekend, Scholars and Athletes Serving Others is a nonprofit. I actually got connected to them. Tracy with Kinetic Kids. Okay. Tracy Fonnoff, you know her, but she put me in touch with them. So we're doing a financial literacy program with them, then doing a free workout for them. And, having volunteers that are seeing the programming, I think, is a good starting point. So following us on social media and our website, the events come fast and furious, so it's hard. I don't have
definitely.
But
what's that website?
finallyfoundation.org.
Yes. And we'll put that link to the website and your socials in the show notes, so everybody can get connected. Awesome. So before we wrap up, is there anything that you wanted to cover today that we didn't quite get to, or any last kind of parting words?
No, I don't think about me, but I really do want to give some kudos to you, not just you, Zach, but you, GiveKit. I mean, this to me feels very, very San Antonio, right? What I love about San Antonio, growing up in Jersey, you might think Jersey is a very, I don't know what people think of it, but my version of Jersey is it's very communal. Like, I could call friends back there and get what I needed without much explanation. It might take a while to get to that trust, but you get it. And I think with San Antonio, we might not be a lot of things, but I think what we have is community. And, me talking to Crystal Darby, getting connected to you.
It was also amazing.
Yeah, Crystal's awesome. But this feels like a very San Antonio thing. I mean, 6 months ago, I was not thinking about creating a podcast. I was not thinking about GiveKit, no offense. Within 6 months, I'm learning myself, and I'm connected to you, and and thank you for inviting me. But more broadly, thank you for doing what you're doing, because I think this is what it's going to take for San Antonio to elevate beyond whatever you think we are to what we want to be.
Definitely, absolutely, and I think you've said it really well earlier. It's collaborating with partners and people that
Yes.
align on that vision.
Yes.
That's how it happens.
That's
so
it.
Awesome! Thank you so much for joining us. It was
Appreciate you, man.
amazing learning about the Finally
Yeah.
Foundation, Stephen. Yeah, and we'll add those show notes to your website and
Yeah.
socials to the show notes. Yeah, awesome.
Appreciate you, man. Thank you. Thanks, Zach.